So quickly before I start the video, I'm just going to show you guys this. So I got this very recently, literally today. As you guys know, that I do a bit of, production work outside of doing this YouTube channel and playing bass and stuff like that. So I got this mini audio interface so I can actually start recording my own stuff into my computer. So I'm really excited about that. I think once the video's finished I'm going to mess around with that. Let's get into the video. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. As promised in my last video, I will be doing a video on my favourite progressive rock albums of 1971. As you guys know, 1971 was quite the monster year for music, not just prog, but just music in general. A lot of my favourite albums came out in 1971, but today I'm just going to touch on the progressive rock albums because I am Neve the Prog Nerd and this is a prog channel. If you want, I could just do a whole video showcase about 1971 or my favourite non-prog albums, because that is a plan of mine. I am planning to talk about my favourite albums of all time that aren't necessarily progressive rock, so if that's something you want to see, then just let me know. Let's just get into the video. As I said, there are quite a lot here, so I'm not gonna blabble on too much about each one, otherwise this video will be like 3 hours long. So let's just start. So the first one we have here, this is Death Walks Behind You by Atomic Rooster. They released 2 albums in this year actually. So we have this one. This one came out a bit later and In the Hearing Of. Both great albums from a great progressive rock band, very blues influenced, very cool, very prog, and if you've not heard of them then I recommend you check them out. I think they're pretty well known in the prog community though. If you know that Carl Palmer actually played with Atomic Rooster before he went to join Emerson, Lake and Palmer. So yeah, this is a great band, highly recommend. Out of these two, I think the In the Hearing Of is my favourite, but both are great. Next up, we have a German progressive rock band called Can. If you can call them prog, I think I'd call them more like experimental prog, very out there. This album is fabulous, fantastic album. Very strange, very experimental, very interesting. That's what drew me to this album. A little known fact, OK Computer by Radiohead, if you're probably familiar with the album, was actually quite heavily inspired by this album. So if you like Radiohead and OK Computer, give this one a try, but this is a very experimental record. Definitely one that I wouldn't give to someone who's trying to get into prog. I think it would just freak someone out on first listen, but this is great and I highly recommend it for a German prog band called Can. Next up, we have the Yes album. Now, in my last video, I think my last one might have been like 1972, I think? Yeah. I pulled out Fragile in 1972 and a lot of you guys picked up on the fact that it wasn't 1972, and then some of you guys were saying, well, the American release was 1972. So I thought it's worth mentioning that the UK release of Fragile was 1971, but I just put it in there because I was following the book again. But we're not talking about Fragile right now, we're talking about the Yes album. This is a great album. This is... oh, for God's sake. This is one of my favourite Yes albums. I think that just the whole vibe of the album is very good. I mean, it had a 50th anniversary recently as well, and this is just great. Starship Trooper, Yours Is No Disgrace, I've Seen All Good People, classic Yes tracks that are very, very good, and a very great album if you maybe want to get into Yes or maybe want to explore more of their discography, then this one is the way to go. I really like the ambience on this one, I really like the guitar tone throughout this album, and the bass actually. Some very, very good mixing on this album, and this particular one is the Steven Wilson remix, so this is a very good mix. I've got a pressing that isn't the Steven Wilson one in here somewhere. I cannot find it right now for the life of me, but I do have it in there somewhere, and yeah, I think I prefer the Steven Wilson one. It sounds more crisp. Another album that had a 50th anniversary, I think, a couple of days ago. This is Aqualung by Jethro Tull, a very iconic album in the progressive rock community and just the music community in general. Such an interesting album. I mean, the cover is very well known. Some anti-religion themes, some very grotesque lyrics. Makes for just a great experience, really. I mean, the music is so good. I mean, it's almost metal-like in the guitar tone. It's almost reminiscent of Black Sabbath, but not quite. This is a great album. If you've not heard it yet, I really doubt that you haven't heard it because you're on a channel about prog and they are one of the defining bands of progressive rock, Jethro Tull, but this is a great album. I think, personally, I prefer Thick as a Brick, but this one's close second. Alright, next we have some Canterbury scene progressive rock here. We have Caravan. This is In the Land of Grey and Pink. I think the first time I heard this one was before I did my Canterbury scene video, like a couple of weeks before then, and this is one of the albums that actually inspired me to make that video. Interesting, very Canterbury-esque sound, of course, because it's Caravan, and great album cover. It looks like something out of Lord of the Rings, but the music's great, musicianship's fantastic. I really like the lyrical content, it's very interesting, and just all around a great album. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It's Caravan, they're a great band and a great Canterbury scene band. If you haven't checked them out, again, another one that I think you probably have because they're very well known in the prog community, give Caravan a listen. They're very, very good. So I think this is going to be when I'm going to start rambling, because the next couple of albums are all going to be ones that I'm very, very into and ones that I very, very much love. Here's the first one. This is Tarkus by Emerson, Lake and Palmer. This was my introduction to ELP a couple of years ago, I think, at this point. I think I've mentioned the story of this album for how I got into it. I had an assignment due the next day, quite a big one as well, and I put this album on because it was recommended to me, and I actually stopped what I was doing. I stopped my work, I stopped my deadline, or stopped my assignment. The deadline was the next day, and I took a walk and I listened to the entirety of this album all over again, so I listened to it twice in one day. Great album. I mean, the intro track, the actual epic itself, Tarkus, it's just amazing. I don't know what else to say. I think my favourite track on this is The Only Way Him, because I really love the sound of the organ. I really love the sound of the keyboards in general on this album, and the drumming is so good on the first track. I'm sorry, I just really got to mention I really love the drums on the first track. I recently listened to the 5.1 surround sound mix of this from the Fanfare box set, and it sounds amazing on the Blu-ray player downstairs. But yeah, this is such a great album. One of my favourite ELP albums, I think my favourite is Trilogy, because I've been listening to that one so much more recently, and the more I hear it, the more I love it. It's like with this one, I mean, I could take this to like an island and not get tired of it because I just love it so much. It gives me shivers every single time, especially the part in Tarkus, the actual big track, Battlefield. It's like the mid to end section. Oh, it just gives me shivers every single time, and I love it so much. So yeah, I'm not going to tell you to listen to this because you probably already have. So yeah, this is a great album, and I could go on about that one for a long time, but I think that I should stop myself for the sake of this video not getting too long. Alright, next up we have Gentle Giant, Acquiring the Taste. This is a fairly recent discovery for me because I had listened to the first Gentle Giant album prior to this one. I loved the opening to this album, it's really great. I mean, this is very much quite an experimental album in a way, especially like the first couple of tracks. I mean, not the first track, but maybe like the second to third tracks are all very interestingly put together. Structures are very irregular, but I love that. It's very kind of typical of Gentle Giant because I've been listening to a lot of their music recently because I'm trying to get more into the second layer of progressive rock, because you have the first, which is like the main bands like King Crimson, Rush, ELP, Genesis, yes, and then you've got the surface underneath, which is Gentle Giant, Graaf Generator, Soft Machine, Caravan, all that kind of stuff, and this is such a great album. That's all I have to say. This is really, really great, and for all those who are getting into prog, check out Gentle Giant when you can. I'd say the first album is the one to go for first, but this one is very, very good. My favourite is Three Friends, but this is very good. I remember the first time I heard this, I thought, wow, didn't think they make music like this ever. Very interesting album cover though. That one always, like, I remember when I first saw the album cover, I was like, what is that? I was trying to work out what it was. It's a bit explicit if you look at it, really. Next up we have Pawn Hearts by Graaf Generator. I did a review of this, and I think it was like my third third review, and it was the first review I did from an album that I'd not heard before, or that I'd only briefly heard, like maybe a couple of tracks. Such a great album. I really love it, and I loved it on first listen, and I've been listening to a lot of Van der Graaf since that particular review, but this one has still remained my favourite. God Bluff is probably a close second, because that has the Undercover Man on it. It's a fantastic song. But this album is so great. I mean, the closing track, the big epic, I think it's The Plague of Lighthouse Keepers or something like that. What a track. What a way. Just an emotional roller coaster of a track. Just an emotional roller coaster of an album. It's beautiful and experimental, and it's everything you want out of a progressive rock album. Definitely something I wouldn't give someone on a first who's getting into prog, but definitely one I'd give to them later on, because this is such a great album, such a raw album, and one that I really recommend to all of you out there who haven't heard this yet. If you want to check out my review, it's on my page. I have a playlist of all my reviews, just so it makes it easier for people who just want to watch through all my reviews. But I'll link that in the description if you want to watch it. But I gave this album a 10 out of 10, and with good reason. It's such a fantastic album. Going back to the outside of UK progressive rock, we have Focus Moving Waves, a Dutch progressive rock band. I'm not too familiar with Focus's music outside of this and Focus 3, but those two albums are great. And this one has the very much well-known track Hocus Pocus, which is a very good song, but it also has Eruption, which is a fantastic piece of music. So I really recommend this if you want to get want to explore more of the outside of the UK prog scene and more into the European prog scene. I don't say European because UK is European, so I'd say outside of UK because it's easier. But this is one of the great bands that came out in the 70s, and one that I really think that you should check out because they're just great, you know, it's just a great band. I mean, guitar tone, very good. I mean, Hocus Pocus, such an explosive track and such a well-known one. It's just fantastic. It's just so great. So ELP actually released 2 albums in 1971, not studio albums. So there's Tarkus, which is the studio album, and then Pictures at an Exhibition, which was the live album, which is the modern adaptation from the classical piece Pictures at an Exhibition. This is very good. I haven't listened to this in a really long time actually, because I've been listening to more of the studio stuff. I don't know why, but I keep skipping over this one. I mean, there's some really great tracks on this. I mean, the Great Gates of Kiev, it's probably my favourite off the album. So good, and the way they were able to make it into a live album, a live adaptation, great musicians, everything. Keith Emerson is a genius on this album, just really great. I think that was like my main, the thing that stood out to me the most when I first heard this. I was like, I've never heard such brilliance before in a band. Like, I think ELP are probably my favourite band at this point, excluding Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden are my all-time favourite band, but they are not prog. So I'd say ELP are my favourite prog act. So anyway, I digress. This is a great record, one that if you have not checked out yet, I recommend it. It's sandwiched between Tarkus and Trilogy, 2 very good albums. But yeah, this is definitely not an overlooked album. This is one that's very much a favourite in the LP community and the prog community in general. But yeah, check it out. Right, I'm going to stop myself from rambling about this one, because this album, Nursery Crime by Genesis, has such an emotional and just a massive meaning for me. It's really kind of like a personal thing. A couple of years ago, me and my friends, we went through a really rough patch in our lives. I mean, I didn't fall out with any friends. We've all fell out with someone who ended up being a complete, just nasty piece of work. And I'm not going to go into obviously because it's personal stuff, but this album really got me through that time, because it was a question of who is real, who are my friends. Like, it's very dramatic, I know, but this album really stuck with me, and I used to go and home, I'd listen to it all the time, and I'd feel better, and I just dive into the world of Genesis and Peter Gabriel and the musicianship, Steve Hackett's guitar, all that kind of stuff, Tony Banks' keyboard playing, everything, I would just love it and embrace it very much. It's one that I'm going to hold dearly to my heart forever and ever, because not only do I associate it with a time in my life where it really helped me through, but it's also one that is a very big, it's very popular amongst the family here, especially with my dad. And yeah, I'm gonna get a bit emotional, but this is a very, very good album, and one that I think that if you've not heard it yet, then you are living under a rock. If you're getting into prog, I would recommend this one. This is a very, very good album, and one that I hold very close to my heart. And yeah, Genesis Nursery Crime. So, I know how I mentioned that Pink Floyd aren't necessarily or not strictly a progressive rock band, but they have released progressive rock material. Here is one of them. This is Metal by Pink Floyd. For some reason I always call this album Echoes because of Echoes. But Echoes isn't the only defining track on this album. One of These Days, such a great intro track. Such one that you can go, yeah, it's so good. Pink Floyd is such a great band. I'm really getting into them at the moment. I mean, I've had my phases of Pink Floyd in and out. I mean, I've listened to the majority of their stuff up until The Wall. I think that's where I cut off. I know a lot of you guys got annoyed in my Pink Floyd collection video because I didn't have the final cut. I haven't listened to that in a long, long time. I've listened to stuff off it. But I've just not gotten around to buying the vinyl version yet. I have it on CD, but I don't have it on vinyl. So yeah, but this is a great album. Pink Floyd at their very, very finest. Even though that Metal is not my favourite Pink Floyd album, it's one of them. My favourite Pink Floyd album is Animals, but I'll talk about that in a video about 1977, but Metal's a great album. Next up, Islands by King Crimson. Now, King Crimson are a very, very good band, as you are very much aware. This album and also Lizard tend to get overlooked from what I can see, because people will concentrate on In the Court of the Crimson King, then Lark's Tongues and Aspic, and then Red. But In the Wake of Poseidon, Lizard and Islands are three very, very, very good albums. Out of the three of them, In the Wake of Poseidon is my favourite, but this is an absolutely beautiful record. Very jazz influenced, of course it would be. Just the saxophone playing, I think there's a saxophone on here. Yeah. The saxophone playing, just everything about this album is just great. It's one that you really got to check out if you like King Crimson, because this is very much, it's King Crimson, but if they took a more jazzy approach. So it's a bit kind of Soft Machine-esque, but less Canterbury scene-y, if that makes any sense. But this is a fantastic album. Listen to it. Because King Crimson aren't just In the Court of the Crimson King, they're not just Lark's Tongues and Aspic, and they're not just Red. They are everything in between. And that's what makes them such a great band. I've got friends who actually like In the Court of the Crimson King, and I keep saying, listen to the other stuff, you know? And I've not heard back since, so I'm hoping that they're listening to those particular albums. This is not going back in. I wish I never took it out. And the very, very last album on our list, don't worry, it was going to be mentioned at one point, Fourth by Soft Machine. I almost forgot to put this one in. Great record, very jazzy, Canterbury scene music. If you liked Third, if you like anything by Soft Machine, then Fourth is the way to go. This is actually a recent purchase for me. I remember when I listened to it, I was like, bye. So I bought it as soon as I heard it because it was so good. And I'm getting more into that kind of side of progressive rock, which is like the more jazz improv side, which is what Soft Machine kind of is. They're very much like a jazz improv-y kind of band with the progressive rock hints of the Canterbury scene and stuff like that. But yeah, they're a very, very good band. This is a very, very good album. My favourite of this is Teeth, which is the opening track. It's just great, an explosion of music. Just great. Great, great, great. Mike Ratledge is such a great keyboards player. And yeah, I recommend Soft Machine to all of you who have gotten into prog already and want to get a bit more experimental with their taste. Soft Machine is the way to go. So that is the end of my 1971 video. I can't wait to start talking about Rush, because all of the years that I've talked about Rush have released no albums that weren't around. So I can't wait to start talking about Rush. That's just a random side note. But what are your guys' favourite albums of 1971, prog or not? So I'd say some of my favourite non-prog albums of 1971 would be Led Zeppelin 4. Great album. Master of Reality by Black Sabbath. That's my favourite Black Sabbath album. Who's Next by The Who. And The Doors' LA Woman. They all came out in 1971. 4 very, very well known, 4 very, very fantastic albums. And I may do a video. I'm very tempted to do a video just about 1971 in general, because there's so much to dissect from that year musically. So I will think about that. Yeah, I think out of all of those, my favourites are Tarkus, Nursery Crime and Porn Hearts. I mean, but they're all very, very good in my books. They're all very fantastic albums. And yeah, so Wednesday is Wednesday reviews. As I said, I'm keeping that a bit more of a secret. And yeah, you can look forward to that. Next week, I'm actually getting my boyfriend to pick my Wednesday reviews, because it's the 10th one and I just thought it'd be a good idea to get someone else to pick it. Yeah, so you guys can look forward to that, and I will see you guys on Wednesday. Bye bye.